What's going on, guys? Today, I have the update to my Cyclone Slayer Tumult build. We've taken the build from League Start all the way through all the Ubers and have made some nice improvements since the last video. Now that I have a live version for the Uber variant of the build, I want to talk about some of the defensive layering, how we scaled the damage of the build, and explain some of the gear choices for those who aren't PoB warriors or vets. Once I'm done with that, we'll go and jump into talk about some of the gems, the gear, the tree, the grafts, and other miscellaneous stuff, so enjoy the T17 mapping and Uber boss footage while I'll explain. So the base of our defense for the build is stacking armor and life. You'll feel comfortable around 4 to 5k life and 25 to 35k armor for T17 maps, but the more the merrier. I'm currently sitting at 4.8k life and around 50k armor. We'll then stack 5 to 7 endurance charges for fizz and elemental damage reduction, and then layer on top of this 20 stacks of fortification, infused channeling, and brutal fervor for less damage taken. We then use Molten Shell and the new Heart of Flame buff from the Molten Zoff Graft to provide an additional 4 to 5k hit pull, and at this point, with that layered on, you are starting to get pretty chunky. We'll also be immune to all elemental ailments thanks to the Stormshroud Viridian Jewel and either an Abyssal Belt with One-Eyed Jewel with chance to avoid being shocked, or if you have Mage Blood with a Flask with chance to avoid being shocked. Top it all off with Lucky Attack and Spell Block for an 87.75% chance to block and the copious amounts of leech that we have, and you'll be cruising through maps. There's a few more small pieces that make up our defensive layering, but that generally covers the biggest points of it. Now, our damage is going to scale based on a few things, the most important being crit and impale. We'll get as close to 100% chance to crit as possible using a solid base critical hit chance Sword Staff, and then increase it using things such as the Diamond Flask, the Precision Aura, power charges, and nodes on the passive tree. Now that we have a 100% chance or near 100% chance to crit, we'll increase our crit multiplier with things such as the Watcher's Eye Prismatic Jewel, affixes on staffs, rings, amulets, and nodes on the passive tree to multiply our damage. This increase in our base damage is used to increase our Impale DPS. Impale is when a hit is applied to a target, 10% of that hit's physical damage is recorded before damage mitigation and then stored. Every successive hit after that will do its normal damage, plus that stored impaled damage from the previous hit for up to 5 hits or 8 seconds at base. There's a lot more math and calculations behind the formula for impale, but this is just the basic summary. We have a 100% or near 100% chance to impale thanks to the new Impaling Gold Graft, either World Implicits and nodes on the tree, so that means every hit on a target will impale them, allowing every hit after to deal increased damage. This is why our damage in some of the footage seems to ramp up the longer the fight goes on. We're inflicting more powerful impales with every single successive hit. The last thing I want to talk about for damage scaling is curses and marks. We use 2 curses in this build, Vulnerability and Assassin's Mark. Now, if you're coming from PoE 2 like me, you may not have realized it at first that Assassin's Mark is considered a curse and a mark in this game, meaning that if you want to apply both Vulnerability and Assassin's Mark, you'll need something like Whispers of Doom or the Body Armor Craft to apply both of the curses on the same target. This is extremely important as both of these curses are vital for single target DPS. Assassin's Mark is going to give us power charges, base critical hit chance, and crit multiplier, and then Vulnerability is going to give us increased physical damage. So if you're not applying both of these curses on the same target, you're either going to be missing out on really big damage or crit, power charges, and crit multiplier. So be sure to either have the Body Armor Craft or the Whispers of Doom Anoint before running a Vulnerability ring and the Assassin's Mark setup. Now, the last thing I want to talk about that's related to damage is why I don't use things like the Abyssus Helmet or the Warlord Hunter Influenced Body Armor, and why I take Infused Channeling over something like Volatility or increased critical damage supports. Now, I absolutely love big damage numbers on Path to Building and watching bosses melt away, but what I love more than that is not dying, especially in my Juice T17s or Ubers. Abyssus is one of those items to me that provides an insane amount of damage. I'm talking 36% more or 42.9 million more damage to my build, but the problem lies in the increased physical damage taken line on the unique. This line cuts our physical max hit by almost 25%, which to me isn't worth getting popped in some of these Juice T17s. The same applies to the Warlord Hunter Influenced Body Armor and some of the support gems. They may provide more damage or free up some skill points, but you're sacrificing so much hit pull that I can't justify swapping them. Now, if you'd rather have the bigger damage numbers, then absolutely go for it, but be warned that you may get one shot much more often if you decide to go with some of these items, uniques, or support gems. Alright, so sorry for the lesson there, but not everyone is a PoE 1 connoisseur, so I wanted to provide the best explanation to the mechanics of the build. So with all that out of the way, let's jump into the skills and support gems. Alright, so we were on the Cyclone Slayer, so now let's talk about some of these skill gems and support gems. So Cyclone Tumult is our main damaging skill. I prefer it over the regular Cyclone because you can scale your damage and your AoE much higher. The downside is that you have less movement speed per stage, up to 5 stages, so 50% less movement speed. We mitigate this movement speed drop with the Stampede boots or a super fast pair of movement speed, elusive tailwind boots, and Mage Blood and the Quicksilver Flask. So if you don't have a whole bunch of divs to spend for the extra movement speed, you just use Stampede for the most part. It's really not that big of a deal. Linked to Cyclone Tumult, we're going to be using Pulverize for the increased area of effect and the more melee area damage. Shockwave, because Shockwave is a secondary explosion, which will go off to give us some extra clear speed and a little bit extra single target damage. Awakened Brutality, or if you don't have the currency, just a regular Brutality for more physical damage. And most importantly, you deal no chaos and you deal no elemental damage. This means if you're running the Elemental Reflect map mod, if you somehow accidentally gain elemental damage from a shrine buff, maybe you're using the divination flask, maybe you somehow have some elemental damage on your staff or your rings or your gloves or something, you can't accidentally pop yourself with Ele Reflect anymore. And we're immune to Fizz Reflect because of the Ascendancy. We then use Infused Channeling because this is going to allow us to deal more damage, but most importantly, take less damage while channeling. So taking less damage while channeling is just going to increase our hit pool to help try to avoid those one-shots. And then lastly, we were going to use the Awakened or just the regular melee physical damage supports. This is probably the best single increase in damage that we can get because 55% more melee physical damage. We then have our Auto Exertion, General Cry, Sunder setup, or Ground Slam, depending on what stage of the build you're at. Auto Exertion is going to reserve a portion of your mana. You have to turn it on, and it will auto Warcry any linked Warcry with it. We are going to be linking General's Cry, so that way whenever it auto Warcries, it will use corpses to turn them into Mirage Warriors, which will then use a socketed attack skill. That socketed attack skill is Ground Slam of Earthshaking or Sunder. If you're in the campaign or just getting into mapping, you can use Sunder, but eventually you do want to swap to Ground Slam of Earthshaking, as its damage ceiling and AoE is higher than Sunder. We then link up melee physical damage or awaken melee physical damage for more physical damage. Pulverize for increased area of effect and more melee area damage. And if you have it, awaken Brutality or just a regular Brutality for the more physical damage and the no chaos, no elemental. For our auras, we are going to be using Flesh and Stone and Blood and Sand. These both, while in Blood Stance, are going to grant you more physical damage and more area damage. This is vital for getting to squeeze out as much damage out of the build as you can. And then we're going to use Pride for up to 20% more physical damage. And then Precision for critical strike chance and accuracy. Now, it is important on your Precision to not over level this. I currently have mine at 7. I could probably bump it up a few more levels. I'm just playing it safe. Because if you drain your mana pool too low, you won't be able to cast your Assassin's Mark. Now, right now, my Assassin's Mark at its current level has a mana cost of 51. So I can't drop my mana pool below 51 or it won't cast Assassin's Mark. So be sure to not overlevel your Precision and to not overlevel your Assassin's Mark. Besides that, I am running a Molten Shell and now Automation setup. This is pretty much going to auto cast my Molten Shell every couple seconds based on the cooldown of it. And Molten Shell is going to be eating damage for us. It's going to essentially give us a 45 to 5,000 hit pool increase. It's going to take damage from Molten Shell before it takes damage from our life. And automation is just there so that way the uptime is more often. And the reason why I prefer this over cast when damage taken is because of the new Molten Zoffgraft. The new Molten Zoffgraft is essentially Molten Shell, but on the graft itself. So you can have both Molten Shell and Heart of Flame give you a DR. You can't have them both at the same time, but pretty much what happens is whenever you don't have max life, Heart of Flame will activate and eat up to, at my level, 4,500 damage. And whenever this goes offline, whenever I'm in map, automation will cast Molten Shell for us. So that means if this isn't active, then probably Heart of Flame is active. And if Heart of Flame isn't active, then probably Molten Shell is active. It's about a 90% uptime for this. So that way you can have that extra layer of hit pull nearly 24/7. It's almost doubling your life pool, essentially. We then are going to have War Banner. War Banner is vital for single target damage. You will build up Valor just by hitting stuff. Once you build up 50 Valor, you drop this banner on the ground. It'll give you a ton more damage. I then have Desecrate. We keep Desecrate at level 1 because this is only used for spawning corpses. These corpses are needed for whenever you are in a boss fight, because typically if you're in an Uber boss fight or just some map boss fight, you don't have corpses to summon your Mirage Warriors. You'll just use this on the floor so that way you can actually summon your minions. They'll automatically summon whenever you Warcry and they'll slam for you. If you're in a prolonged boss fight, just be sure to use your Desecrate again to resummon your minions. I then have my mark on hit and my assassin's mark set up. Like I said, you have to make sure that your assassin's mark is not too over leveled. It is vital to have assassin's mark because you get the extra critical strike chance, the extra critical strike multiplier, and most importantly, the 5% chance to get a power charge when you hit a cursed enemy. That cursed enemy is typically a rare or the boss, so this is the only way that you can sustain power charges in a boss fight. So you'll need this to ensure that your critical hit chance is capped and that you get that little bit extra damage. And then lastly, we have our Frost Blink and our Blood Rage. Our Frost Blink, this is our movement skill. I like Frost Blink because you can use it while you are spinning. It doesn't stop your animation. That's what's great about it. You don't have to worry about pausing your spin. You can just keep on moving. And then we are going to be using Blood Rage because Blood Rage is going to grant us frenzy charges and give us attack speed. Whenever you enter the map, you'll just use your Blood Rage to grant you this buff. If you kill something, you have a chance to get a frenzy charge. Whenever you kill something, it also refreshes the duration of this buff. So that just means that you can sustain your frenzy charge whenever you're mapping and you are good to roll. So yeah, that is all of the skill and support gems. So now let's go over the gear. All right, so now let's talk gear, and we'll start with the staff first. So on the staff, the most important things is going to be that it is a increased physical, the highest increased physical damage staff that you can get, that it's an attack block base, and that you have critical strike chance on it. So we want it to be the highest physical damage as possible because we are using brutality support, so that way we have no elemental, no chaos, so you want as much phys damage as possible. We want it to be an attack block base because of the versatile combatants keystone, and we want it to be a increased critical strike chance staff because we want to cap our crit as easily as possible. Now, you can craft a staff like this yourself. I'll link a video in the description. Essentially, I bought a fractured T1 increased physical damage base. I slammed it with Essences of Contempt until I got the T2 or hybrid increased physical damage. And then I just proceeded to clear out the suffixes. I did a Veiled Exalted Orb craft. I then crafted on a little bit more and used the Horror crafting station. And then I tempered orbed it to get the increased explicit physical modifier magnitude and ended up with a staff like this. It probably cost me all in all around 40 to 50 div to craft this staff, and it's worth somewhere over 100 div. So you can do this yourself if you have the currency to invest in it. Like I said, I'll link a video, so go check that out if you want to. On the chest piece, which is probably the next most important piece of the build, is that we are going to be wanting to get the Eater and Searing Exarch influence for melee hits have a chance to fortify and increased effect of non-cursed auras from your skills. This is important because fortification is going to give us 20% less damage taken at max stacks, so we want to be able to fortify whenever we are mapping. This is cheaper than getting an Overlord Jewel, so I like this option the best. And then increased effect of non-cursed auras is just going to make the magnitude of auras like your Pride, your Blood and Sand, and your Flesh and Stone a little bit higher to give you a little bit more damage. I then like to go for the additional physical damage reduction line because this is very, very huge for increasing your phys max hit. And then I craft on chance to block attack damage because this is going to make it easier to cap your block chance out. And then just get whatever res or attributes that you need. I do like to avoid the max life roll in body armor because you can get the max life mastery right here for 15% increased max life if there are no life modifiers on your body armor. This results at my point around 300 max life versus the 150 that you could get on the body armor itself. Next up, I will talk about the boots as this is a pretty important part of the build. So if you don't have a lot of currency, the Stampede is the way to go. Stampede is going to give you 150% movement speed all the time, whether you're spinning or not. And it's also going to reduce the cooldown of your Frost Blink. You'll go from about a 3-second cooldown to a 1.7-second cooldown. This will make it much faster for you to get around until you have the investment to get Mage Blood for a movement speed flask and a pair of boots like this. These boots are a increased movement speed, elusive, and tailwind boots. Tailwind's going to give you increased action speed. Elusive is going to give you increased movement speed. This is how we outscale the slow of Cyclone once you have the investment for it. So it allows you to move around pretty fast, but it is quite expensive to do. For the gloves, I have gone for the Eater and Searing Implicits again. I have chance to impale and increase critical strike chance with attacks. The impale line is the most important one. Make sure you get this. This will allow you to impale more often to deal more ramping damage. And then you can either go for increased critical strike chance, global accuracy rating, or attack speed or on that next line. On these pair of gloves themselves, try to get as much armor as you can, as much max life as you can, and then if you have room for it, getting accuracy and increased damage while leeching is pretty nice. Otherwise, just cover your reses, cover your attributes. For the helmets, I have these Searing, Exarch, and Eater influences again, and these are also really important because the increased mana reservation efficiency of skills is going to reduce the amount of mana that they're reserving, which allows us to actually be able to run all of these auras at the same time. Then the reduced mana cost of attacks is going to allow our Cyclone to have a 0 mana cost, which to me is nice because if I'm running the map mod to where players cannot regenerate mana or life, I want to be able to spin and not think about it, and that just covers that for me. On the helmet itself, after that, I'd like to get as much armor as possible, life, and then cover your reses, cover your attributes, and if you have room for it, get accuracy so that way your hit chance can be 100%. Now let's talk about the jewelry. On the rings, on one of your rings, you're going to want channeling skills have -3 the total mana cost. This is going to make your Cyclone have as close to 0 mana cost as possible. Once you have the Whispers of Doom Anoint or the chest piece craft, you can get a curse enemies with vulnerability on hit ring. Vulnerability is going to increase the physical damage that a target takes, so this is a huge single target DPS increase. Otherwise, cover your reses, cover your attributes. If you want attack speed, go for it. I don't recommend the adds physical damage to attacks line as it's pretty minimal in PoE 1 versus 2. On this ring, I have the Vermilion base ring for the increased max life. I am currently trying to craft a Vermilion base ring right here. I just have not hit it yet for this slot because I am overcapped in my chaos, but the Vermilion base ring, in my opinion, is the best ring for this build outside of the synthesized one with +1 maximum endurance charges because that up to 8% increased max life is huge for increasing our hit pool. So if you can get a Vermilion base, that's nice. On this one, I just have reses, life, some add damage, and attributes. Just get whatever you need on your rings filled out. And then for the amulets, the big thing on the jewelry is to get your attributes covered. So I've got a strength int implicit with adds int, and then life is nice. And if you want extra damage, you can get global critical strike multiplier, global critical strike chance, increase damage while leeching, cover your reses, whatever. And I'm anointing with Whispers of Doom, which will allow me to apply an additional curse. This means I can apply both vulnerability and Assassin's Mark at the same time for a ton of extra damage. And then on to the one that everybody gets turned away from, and that is Mage Blood. Now, this is my second PoE 2 league, and if I can get a Mage Blood and a mirror, I'm sure that you as well can get a Mage Blood in a mirror. So just grind away. You can for sure get it if you have the time or if you have the knowledge. This is kind of more of a min-max thing to cover your flask. It's not required. It's not going to make or break the build. Mage Blood is just great for quality of life. For me, it's resulting in more armor, it's resulting in more movement speed, it's resulting in more critical strike and way overcapped reses, and it's also giving me my chance to avoid being shocked in onslaught. So Mage Blood by no means is required to run the build. I didn't have Mage Blood forever. I just used an Abyssal Belt like this with a eye jewel, so you can make do with whatever point. You don't have to have Mage Blood to make this work at all, and I pretty much covered the flask here. You can see what I'm running. And then on my life flask, I just have immunity to bleed and corrupted blood and gain a flash charge to deal a crit strike. Now, eventually, if you wanted to, you could swap on a Progenesis, but crown effects to me are pretty gnarly for this build. If you're not hitting something, like if you're backtracking and picking up loot, you definitely want to have a life flask, because if there's like a Awakener's Desolation or something like that, you could end up dropping your life a ton, and I hate going in and out of maps just to heal or refill my flash charges. So I would say run a life flask, or if you want to, for Ubers, run a Progenesis. And that is the gear. So let's talk about the Grafts. All right, so for the Grafts, which I probably should have included this in the gear section, but we're going to go and talk about these two Grafts right here. A Impaling Old Graft and a Molten Zoth Graft. Now, these two, in my opinion, are the two best in slot for this build. One is for damage, one is for defense. The Impaling Old Graft is going to give you implicit chance to impale, affix chance to impale, and then you can use the skill itself as well to get increased effective impale. And then the last line on it that I have is Violent Desire used by this graft also grants increased attack speed. So this graft alone is giving me 29% chance to impale, 23% increased effective impale, 30% chance to inflict an additional impale, and 11% attack speed. So a lot of value in this graft for damage. And then this graft right here, the Molten Zoff graft, not only is it essentially giving me Molten Shell, but it's also granting me increased armor, increased attack damage, and increased armor again. So a lot of defense in this graft right here. The fire projectiles from this, it will not kill you with Ellie Reflect. This has been tested. The devs confirmed it themselves. You don't have to worry about Ellie Reflect if you are using this graft because it does shoot off fire projectiles. It won't kill you. I really, really like this flask. If you can get +4 level or increase cooldown recovery or increase skill effect duration for that last line on it, that would be perfect. But this graft is starting to get kind of expensive now. People picked up on how good this is. So, you know, spend as much as you would like to as you can here. They're not hard to get. You can get a ton of them from the tree. So whatever you can get your hands on, but definitely these two are my two favorites for this build. Real quick as well, I forgot to talk about this Jolting Ash graft that I have as a swap. It's kind of like an optional one. If you want to min-max your DPS, this graft is insane for damage, but it does increase the damage that you take. So this Jolting Ash graft has the Overcharged Sinews skill. Overcharged Sinews is going to grant you at level 34, 3% more maximum attack damage. For 10 stacks. So 10 stacks of Jolt equals 30% more maximum attack damage, but also grants 10% increased damage taken. So with that 30% more maximum attack damage and Jolt granted by this graft grants +4 to critical strike multiplier, you're getting 30% more max damage and 40% critical strike multiplier, which is insane for damage. But that increased damage taken, it can be pretty gnarly if you're running a super juice map. I don't like to get popped or die, so I don't typically run this. I did buy it and run it for a little while just to show it off for the video. This is more of like a Pinnacle Boss swap if you wanted to, but not what I would typically run when mapping. Just wanted to throw it out for those who wanted to maximize their damage. All right, so now I'm going to show off a T17 map real quick. Currently, I am using a Strongbox Scarab farm. It's not like the FUBGum setup. It is kind of like my own setup that I'm using right now. This is my current Atlas that I'm using for it. It's revolving around using a 2 regular ambush scarabs, a hidden compartments, a potency, and a discernment. And it's much cheaper than containment farming. It's not as much of a jackpot farm as containment, but I've used it to farm up my mirror. It's cheaper. Not as many people are using these scarabs versus containments and nemesis, so cheaper to get started into. You can run it in 16.5s or 16s and still make money. But this is my setup, and here is the T17 map juiced up, and we are going to run Eater Influence and hop right into it. All right, so typically whenever I run these maps, I run straight to the boss, kill the boss, and then I come back, clear the map, then run the strong boxes. But for the sake of the video and it not being boring in this demo, we're just going to kill stuff on the way. So the main stuff with Cyclone is that while you are running around, that you want to be frost blinking as much as you can to kind of accelerate your travel across the map as fast as possible. There isn't like too much that's too complicated with it. You just kind of, you know, walk around, you spin, you know, not too complicated. Cyclone will cover everything. You can see shockwave going off. All those extra explosions that you see, the white ones, those are my shockwaves popping off. But pretty much you just spin your way through the map, frost blink whenever you can. Watch out for any instant death mechanics, of course, but not too much to it. You just got to watch out for these volatile cores. Make sure they don't pop you, and don't stand in these tentacle fiend fields. But not too complicated, pretty simple, pretty tanky thanks to Lucky Block and all the life and the stacks of our power charges, endurance charges, frenzy charges. You want to make sure that you tap your blood rage every so often to ensure that you have your frenzy charges. But yeah, nothing too much really to it. You just kind of walk through perfectly at the boss. You can drop your banner on him and melt him away. Nothing too complicated. Watch out for those volatile cores like that and try to kill you. And yeah, real quick, I say let's sprint straight down here to the boss and show you guys what a boss fight will look like. Now, if you're farming T17s and you have problems with certain bosses, I do recommend Fortress. Fortress is probably one of the easier map bosses to fight, probably the easiest, I'd say, in T17s, but, you know, just in case something crazy happens, there's my portal. You're gonna want to pop your Desecrate on the ground and then start spinning, and hopefully not crash your game. But pop Desecrate again just to make sure that we're good. And then I'll go ahead and drop my banner now. And motor away. All right, and that is the T17 map boss. I guess I'll real quick go pop a Uber Pinnacle boss for you guys and show what that looks like. All right, I'm gonna show off two different ones for you guys. I got these two right here because they are pretty cheap and I don't want to spend a whole bunch on this. I've already shown off all the Uber boss fights in the beginning of the video. I paid for all of them and killed them all multiple times. So I'm just gonna show you these real quick and show you how that goes because they're not very expensive. All right, so we got the Moment of Loneliness. Same principle, you'll drop down your Desecrate and spin away. Make sure you pop your Blood Rage every so often, so that way you'll get your increased attack speed. You cannot hide from fate. Drop my banner down. And yeah, that's it for that boss, and now we'll jump over to the other one. Alright, so here we are on the other boss fight. I'm also not using the overcharged sinews at all, so my damage could be even higher if I wanted to. Same thing, pop Blood Rage, pop Desecrate, spin away. You'll notice our damage starts to ramp the more impales that we inflict. I'll drop my War Banner, and we'll really start cooking them. And he's dead. So, pretty easy, not too shabby. It's not like the craziest thing out there. You know, it's just very easy to do. It's not a hard build. So you can very easily cover anything that you need to. Don't got to get too intricate. Don't got to invest a mirror into the build. I've just happened to accrue all my gear over the period of the league start. So not too shabby. That is the Pinnacle bosses and how the loop goes. If you want to see the others, go check out the beginning of the video. And yeah, let's see you guys out of here. All right, so that's going to be it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I just wanted to post this as kind of maybe the final update to Cyclone for the league. I do have this mirror to spend that I farmed up, so maybe I break this back down into some divs and invest a little bit more and get some crazier gear pieces, or maybe I get a mirror tier staff or something, but we'll kind of see. I farmed for it for a reason. I want to use it. We'll see how she goes. You guys let me know what you guys want to see next. PoE 2 League is right around the corner, so let me know what your guys' thoughts are. Hope you guys enjoyed the build, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Take care.